when the neuroimmune system is off track like this, it no longer maintains balance. Because what the vagus nerve wants to do to regulate the immune system is keep it balanced and on the ready always. Instead, what happens when your child has subluxation and vagus nerve dysfunction, it's never fully functional. Welcome to the Experience Miracles podcast, where we help parents find hope, answers, and drug-free help to overcome your child's chronic health challenges. I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, and I'll be sharing my experiences as both a dad and a doctor on every episode. I can take the latest science and neurology of healing and break it down in the most simple and relatable way possible. We'll take on the toughest topics and answer your biggest questions through interviews with other amazing parents and leading experts, leaving you with practical action steps that you can take to help your child heal and thrive. It's time to expect and experience miracles. Let's get started. All right, everyone. How are you? Experience Miracles podcast community, family, tribe. We are releasing this one right around a very blessed, amazing celebratory season called Christmas. And that also means supposedly 'tis the season, as they say, for tons of sickness and tons of illness and tons of colds and tons of flu and tons of walking pneumonia and tons of chest congestion and tons of coughs and colds and flus and viruses and bacteria and everybody. Okay, not everybody. I never like it when people use that term. I don't like absolutes. I don't like very much throwing the baby out with the bathwater metaphorically, where we just say, oh, it's winter, we're all going to get sick. And I also don't like to say, I'm correcting myself here mid-sentence, mid-first minute of the podcast to say, not everybody, especially those of us who tune into podcasts and platforms like this and are moving into this. In chiropractic, we would call it life without fear. Now, that's a dramatic statement to say, you know what? We believe we're made to be healthy, even in the winter. We believe that when we tap into and regulate and make sure our nervous systems, our immune systems, our gut and our microbiome and our household and our lifestyle and our mindset, all of these things are tuned in, optimized, and healthy, we don't buy into the 'tis the season, we're all going down, everybody's going to get sick. But man, most people do, don't they? And especially if you tap into your school community, your friendship or other parent group community, your church community, if you know about what really creates health and what really keeps us healthy and what really gets us through an illness or an infection, which definitely it's pretty darn normal for us and our kids to have at least one or two per year. And maybe there's a little bit more likelihood in the winter. Okay, there is, because we're not outside getting vitamin D and all the reasons I've covered on a different podcast. But I want to tap into some granular, neurological, helpful, crazy helpful science and action steps for you with this one, and talk about how to supercharge your family's immune systems by tapping into the vagus nerve. Because it frustrates me to no end that most families, and many of them around me, not so much in the practice because we teach this stuff that I'm going to teach on this podcast episode, but definitely at our kids' school, definitely at their sporting events, and definitely in our church community. It just, motivates me to do this podcast and make content like this, because God designed us to be healthy, not victims. God designed us to be in charge of our health, not just merely a passerby and there's nothing we can do. So now I say all that, and it's real as rain that kids get sick, people get sick all the time. Maybe again, a little bit more in the winter for all the reasons that we actually know what they are and we can combat them naturally and effectively. And it just happened in my household last week. Our oldest baby girl, Addison, 17, you know what? Maybe after 17 years of being a chiropractic kid, and maybe when you are a teenager, just maybe you don't like to always knock out everything on the natural, holistic, chiropractic stay healthy list. So just maybe, let's just suppose, sometimes we let our guard down. Sometimes we get a little dysregulated and a little more inflamed, and our immune system and our vagus nerve gets a little more off track. And that illness, that virus gets in, sets up shop, and makes us feel like crap for a couple of days. Well, this conversation about how to supercharge your immune system by tapping into the vagus nerve is designed for two purposes that are really one. Number one, prevention. When you take what we're going to teach in this one and you deploy it as regularly and as fully as possible, well, then your family, then your kids, then your immune systems are always supercharged, shield up, ready to roll. Okay? That's how you avoid illness. You don't avoid illness by staying away from people who are sick. You avoid illness by having a badass immune system, by having a rockin' nervous system, and making sure that it is on the ready irregardless of exposure, because exposure to germs and viruses and bacteria does not make us sick. Our inability to be resilient and overcome them does. And there's things that lead to that and leave us more susceptible to that. So goal number one of this podcast, talking about the vagus nerve and supercharging your immune systems, is proactive prevention. Okay? We want to be prepared and rock this winter and holiday season and all the way through the next school semester and into the spring and, into life. Number two, there's going to be times where you're scuffling a little bit. There's going to be times where you go on vacation and you eat out. There's going to be times where you don't get outside and sweat and work out and get sunshine and get vitamin D. There's going to be times where you have final exams or tons of work or family parties or Christmas concerts or sports tournaments or all the things that routinely, normally, totally understandably throw our families off track, and our best intentions sometimes get sidetracked, and our immune systems and our nervous systems, sometimes even us chiropractic wellness families, our nervous systems get dysregulated. And sometimes many kids have had such a tough start because of the perfect storm, because pregnancy, fertility, labor, delivery, and early childhood led to so much stress on their nervous system. We call that the perfect storm and subluxation, and we cover it all the time here. And then so much dysregulation onto the neuroimmune system and vagus nerve dysfunction, which is the topic of today, which leads to chronic inflammation and immune system suppression. Oftentimes, our kiddos are starting off really behind the eight ball. Their immune systems from birth, sometimes even from before birth, are not built up very strong. They're not very regulated. They don't have a lot of resilience. So that would almost kind of be a third reason, I guess, or a third category, third group of people to really tap into this episode, because these things we're about to teach and cover and say, here's how you help. They might need to be 3x'd or 10x'd for your kiddo, for your family, if you know that their immune system has always been suppressed, has always been off track. If you know that since birth, they've been more susceptible to congestion and chronic illness and RSV and croup and ear infections and so forth. If you know they've been on a ton of antibiotics and a ton of inhalers and a ton of steroid-based medications. If you know that they had adverse reactions and immune system dysregulation ever since a well child check. And those things happen all the time. So this episode, this conversation is especially for those families, okay? Now, what about this vagus nerve? What about this guy? Do we know it's a guy? It's a girl? I don't know. It's like a superhuman nerve. It's just a supernatural nerve and part of our incredible nervous system that God gave us. And the vagus nerve, if you've never heard me talk about this, never heard of the vagus nerve at all, it's the first time you're tapping into the podcast here. Vagus nerve is VAGUS, and it is the most important, intricate, kick-ass nerve in the entire body, okay? So the vagus nerve is forever forward here. It's going to be our cheat code, all right? Now, the vagus nerve is very connected to things like inflammation and the microbiome and autonomic nervous system regulation. So if you're into other conversations about homeopathic remedies, functional medicine, integrative care, and they are saying, hey, if you take this, do this, your microbiome gets better, you're going to be helping your vagus nerve by doing that. If those folks, those areas say, hey, do this, and you will be able to combat inflammation, awesome. You're going to help your vagus nerve work better by doing so. If nervous system folks like me say, here's the things you can do to help regulate your family's nervous systems, awesome. You're tapping into the vagus nerve, and you're going to help it function better. So all of these positive just healthy things point to vagus nerve regulation and function, and all of the perfect storm, negative, sort of toxic, stressful, chaotic things that are out there in the world lead to vagus nerve dysfunction. So whichever way, whichever angle we take this conversation, we begin and end with the vagus nerve. We begin and end with the nervous system. But that's where I want to start with this deep dive science episode. Remember, individual deep dive episodes, when we get into the thick of it, which here we are. I've got my notes right here on the screen, and we're going to get real granular. We're going to get real nerdy. We're going to get real neurophysiologic-y, okay? Even though we're just going to make up words as we go. So we make sure that they are simple and relatable. You'll never find a podcast that gets this nerdy, this much into neurology and physiology, and today we're really going into immunology, and then brings it to a very simple understanding so your family can bring it to life, okay? So 30,000 foot view. Why the heck is the vagus nerve so important? If you know very little about it, here's its nuts and bolts. The vagus nerve is very, very, very much about the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system is our rest, digestion, regulation, healing, recovery, inflammatory modulation side of what's called the autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system has another branch called the sympathetics. That's why the parasympathetics, para means counter or breaking. The parasympathetics are more essential, more important, because they're more suppressed, dysregulated, and shut down in today's highly stressful, toxic world than ever before, because we're exposed to all this stress, we're exposed to all these toxins, and our kids are too. That's the perfect storm. And so what happens is our sympathetic nervous system becomes completely overstimulated, overreactive, and our parasympathetic vagus nerve becomes underactive, suppressed. We can actually teach you research. I'm not necessarily going to pull that apart here on this one, but we actually know if pregnancy, labor, and if the fertility, perinatal pregnancy, what's called the fetal developmental journey, and then labor and delivery in early childhood, if they are highly stressful, highly inflammatory, high stress, we actually suppress and slow and delay the development of the vagus nerve. So many kiddos are being born they end up not only with a vagus nerve that is dysfunctional, they end up with a vagus nerve that hasn't even fully matured and come online yet. So where does the vagus nerve enter the chat when it comes to the immune system and helping our body rid itself of infections? Now let's tap into that. We want to not only avoid them, but sometimes they get a hold of us. Sometimes they get a hold of our families. And so the biggest frustration we see all winter long is kids and families or parents saying, my kiddo is not only susceptible to colds and congestion and mucus and ear infections and sinus infections and strep infections, especially if this is a pandas family, you got to really listen to this one. And then RSV and croup and walking pneumonia and bronchitis. And basically, they're all in the same department. The immune system, the respiratory, the lymphatic system gets filled up with inflammation, congestion, making difficulty, triggering fevers, triggering inflammation, triggering respiratory distress, which generally in the medical world is going to trigger medication after medication. Here's your antibiotics, because those are super great for viral infections. And then here's your nebulizers, here's your steroid-based medications. And if we can't get it out of the ears, or we can't get it out of the throat, well, then we'll just send you to an ENT and they'll drill a hole in it, put a tube in it, or they'll just slop out your adenoids and tonsils and amputate part of your immune system, which is words that a mom just told me the other day. And I was like, that is a very accurate, very direct way of saying what is happening, because those are not leftover body parts they just get rid of. Those are key components to the immune system, and they are in the way because the immune system is dysregulated, very much right in the same ballpark as the vagus nerve. So when they get cut out of the way, all that happens is we drive that infection, we drive that inflammation, and we drive that dysregulation further into the body. So what we find in case history all the time is that when little ones first started having ear infections and antibiotics destroyed their immune system in their gut even further, then after multiple rounds of antibiotics, the pediatrician refers them to an ENT, they get tubes. Oh, look at that, ba-bam, the ears are better, but now your child's snoring, now your child is congested, now their speech changes, now their sinuses are filled up, now they're getting strep infections all the time, now you go look in the room, they can't breathe, breathe. They can't, you don't even need a flashlight or to be a doctor. You just look in their mouth and their tonsils and their adenoids are completely enlarged and inflamed. You go back to the same ENT, they lop those suckers out, and now your child has bronchitis. Now your child has asthma. Now your child has pneumonia, because all they did is move the problem further into the body. That is the business of medicine. Pediatrician, ENT, medications, trifecta, perfect storm, all of itself. I knew somewhere in this episode I would go through that sequence, and I know that for thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of you, if we had that many listening in, and one day we'll hear that and go, son of a gun. That is literally what happened to my child. Why did they not tell me that's all they're doing? Because they didn't tell you any of the other stuff we're teaching in this episode as well. Because if they don't know how to tap into the nervous system, they don't know how to tap into the vagus nerve, they don't know how to tap into the immune system and get it to work better on its own naturally, then there's no other way to rid your child's body of the problem. So they use surgery and they use medication, because when all you have is a hammer and nails, that's all you use. That's all you recommend. And so now we want to go back to my sentence that started that little rant. How do we rid the body of these infections? The truth is there's a very intelligent, full multi-systems function to the immune system, to the bodily system, that knows what to do to get rid of a virus, to get rid of a bacteria, to get rid of an infection. Now, what we're going to need to tap into, and the vagus nerve is going to be the harmonizer. The vagus nerve is going to be the play caller and organizer of all these systems that need to work together in sequence to rid the body of these infections. And so that's why when I get into these pieces and parts, when we talk about structure, almost kind of like the biomechanical congestion, getting muscles and lymphatics and the respiratory system to just do a better job plumbing and moving mucus and congestion through the body so it can get out of the body. That's one thing your kiddos and maybe yourself really struggle with. Like, you can literally just physically see they're always congested. They can't cough it up. They can't get rid of it. They can't clear it out. Subluxation, which leads to vagus nerve dysfunction, really affects the biomechanical, neurophysiological plumbing of the body. So that's a part of it, okay? And vagus nerve dysfunction leads to that. Then there's the inflammatory cascade, all right? Then there's this inflammation regulation, kind of better known as the inflammatory cascade. And if you think I've been pretty nerdy so far these last 5 to 10 minutes, buckle up, buttercup. We're about to get into it here, okay? So what the heck is the inflammatory reflex? And remember, we're saying vagus nerve is the word of the day. Do not turn this podcast episode into a drinking game, okay? Remember, anytime we get a little too serious and a little too sciencey on this podcast, we just veer hard left and we throw in a dad joke or an inappropriate story. You know, it's just the right amount of inappropriate. It's a podcast about kids and families. I'm going to cross probably a line. According to my wife, I would definitely be crossing a line right here. But then I think there's another line. I think it goes a little bit further, and I'm not going to go to that one. So if you were to play a drinking game with this podcast, and every time I say vagus nerve, you take a shot of something, how about we make it kombucha? Okay, you want to really build an immune system super strong? Listen to this podcast episode and take a shot of apple cider vinegar every single time I say vagus nerve. Just kidding. Even though that stuff is super good and good for you, I definitely think there's probably such thing as vinegar toxicity. And I have already said vagus nerve enough times and will say it so many more times to leave you pretty potent, you know, if you were to do that. So how about we get back on track and we just talk about this inflammatory cascade? Okay, there we go. There was our momentary, you know, our requisite one per podcast at least sidebar, whatever we call that. Okay, so inflammatory cascade. Number one step on this flow chart, the vagus nerve is a sensory nerve. So in this inflammatory cascade, completely governed by the vagus nerve and the autonomic nervous system, there is first detection of a problem, detection of inflammation, detection of viruses, bacteria, and foreign materials in the body. Pause right here. The vagus nerve needs to be bussin'. The vagus nerve needs to be on point, full potential, no interference. Subluxation, which I'm going to talk about lightly on this episode, we talk a lot about on other episodes. Subluxation, especially if it's within the neck and with it's in the upper thoracic spine, which is really there from birth trauma and other sort of things. Subluxation leads to nervous system interference, particularly of the vagus nerve's sensory detection, what's called afferent. So afferent is a neurological term for incoming signals from the body and the environment into the brain. And that's the first step in the inflammatory cascade. The vagus nerve is constantly at work monitoring inflammatory levels and inflammation levels in the body through sensory receptors that are located in various tissues and organs. Our design by God is incredible. And I think if you really wanted to be like, wow, God, wow, study neurology, study the vagus nerve, and you look at how this system is built, and it's both intricate and vast and complicated. And then the best things in life are beautifully simple too, right? You can see their function through simplicity of design. Well, that's this system. Okay, so I digressed in a good way with that one. All right, so first, the vagus nerve is constantly monitoring the entire body, especially the gut and the respiratory system and the lymphatic and those systems for inflammation. When there is signals of trouble, when there is signs of trouble, these signals are sent into a nucleus, which sits right up around the C2 vertebrae, which is called the axis vertebrae, which is a part of the neurospinal system that neurotonal, neurologically focused chiropractors know how to find and take care of better than anybody else. But there's a little nucleus up there, which is so fun to say out loud. So here we go. It's called the nucleus tractus solitarius. Did you know that so much of medical terminology and physiological and anatomical terminology are in Latin? So did you know when you go to nerd school, so chiropractic school, medical school, instead of taking like Spanish and languages that are still taught and would actually function in my day-to-day life, I actually took 2 years of Latin because that's how you become more familiar with these words, okay? And served a purpose for me in my life, but I don't think Latin is so useful for too many others. So nucleus tractus solitarius. Go ahead and say it out loud right now if you want to, listening in, okay? Called the NTS nucleus there in the brainstem. And it's a key relay center that integrates information about the body's internal neuroimmune modulation and inflammatory state. So this nucleus tractus solitarius, I got 3 in, is that relay air traffic control center specifically for this function, neuroimmune and neuroinflammatory regulation. It processes signals about inflammation and communicates with higher brain centers. So if you just think about the anatomy of the body, you got the vagus nerve, which is this huge sensory receptor. So it's a big set of wires. And so wires are like nerves, and they're going out into the body, and they're sending sensory afferent signals through to the brainstem first. Now, the brainstem is in the neck. This is where chiropractic people go, how the heck can chiropractic help my immune system be stronger? Well, we're going to tap right into the vagus nerve. We're going to tap right into the nucleus tractus solitarius, because if there is subluxation right up there, especially at C2, which happens all the time from birth, especially vacuum extraction and C-section births, but also forceps, induction, other sort of things. But we see C2 subluxations all the time with chronic immune, chronic congested, chronically sick kids. And a lot of it has to do with this inflammatory cascade and the key player in the middle of the relay center, which is this NTS nucleus, because from the brainstem, so base of the skull, top of the neck, now that information goes to higher brain centers, specifically and in a major way, the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus now regulates and communicates with the rest of the autonomic and hormonal system. So you may have heard of something called the HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. And you may have heard that if my adrenals are overreactive and they kick out too much cortisol and adrenaline, my body will be in a pro-inflammatory state, or my child's. That's true. And adrenals are a lot talked about, and they should be. And I should do a whole podcast episode about the adrenals. In fact, I was interviewed on Dr. Allie Miller's podcast called the Naturally Nourished Podcast. And then we interviewed her on ours, and those episodes are really going to tap into that. So the hypothalamus, pituitary, and the adrenals, very important in this inflammatory cascade. But I got to go slow as I'm going fast. They are doing what the vagus nerve and the nucleus tractus solitarius are telling them to do. So the adrenals so often are not actually the root cause. So if you've had a natural health functional practitioner tell you that you or your child's issues are adrenal issues, adrenal insufficiency, or even things like the MTHFR genetic things where it's adrenals and my detox pathways are limited, it's not always the case that it's that. quite often, almost always, it's actually something even deeper with vagus nerve dysfunction and what's called dysautonomia here within the nervous system. And that's why those systems are in play. So this central processing from there goes to the hypothalamus. And now the hypothalamus, which is the brain, is going to send these signals that were incoming and relayed into the brain. Remember, we're talking about a reflex. So what comes in must come out. So now there's going to be efferent outgoing signals to the body that says, hey, spleen, hey, liver, hey, other immune regulating organs, let's kick out some inflammatory molecules. Let's kick out cytokines. Let's kick out interleukin 1, interleukin 6, TNF. If you've gone nerdy, you know these things. And so what happens is now there's this what's called cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway after the system is already rolling. And when it's really working, the final control mechanism is to say, okay, we needed inflammation. Has inflammation done its job? Has inflammation created the reaction the body needs to get a hold of the bad guys, get rid of the bad guys, and now how do we fully rid the body of the bad guys? If this system stays stuck at step 2 or step 3 and can't get to step 3, and especially step 4, which is to finish getting it out of the body stays constipated with congestion. The body stays constipated with chronic illness, viruses, and bacteria. And that is what happens to so many kids who have been through the perfect storm. Even the ones whose families and parents, most of you listening, have awesomely changed their diet, added supplements, added homeopathics, added herbal remedies, added essential oils, and you're trying to support the body from the inside out. You're trying to avoid putting inflammatory foods, gluten and casein and chemicals in there. And you're putting in all these immune system, anti-inflammatory, microbiome boosting supplements and vitamins and interventions into it. But yet your kid's body still can't poop, sneeze, cough, fever, clear the body of problems. It's a vagus nerve dysfunction, subluxation, and they are stuck between step 2 and step 3 of this inflammatory cascade loop. See, the way the body is designed is any job that gets started needs to get finished. And what we find right now today is that when kiddos, when parents, when any of us are stuck in this completely sympathetic dominant, subluxated, dysautonomic, dysregulated vagus nerve dysfunction, immune system suppression, and dysregulation status, all those things I just said are basically you can wrap up into one. When the neuroimmune system is off track like this, it no longer maintains balance. Because what the vagus nerve wants to do to regulate the immune system is keep it balanced and on the ready always. Instead, what happens when your child has subluxation and vagus nerve dysfunction, it's never fully functional. Your child's resilience is limited. So they are more susceptible to the just basically that congestion and that problem getting in. And then like we've been talking about through this whole episode, the real 2B problem is when it gets in, not only does it get in easier, the real issue is your child can't get rid of anything. So infections and seasonal transitions and winters just seem to pile on. And even though you've shifted your lifestyle and added all these things to try and build up their immune system, you can just tell. Your gut just tells you they're still so sick all the time. You could just look at them and their skin is really pale and really fatigued and there's bags under their eyes and they're always mucousy and they're always congested and they're always nasally and they always have a postnasal drip. So all that really happens is sometimes it gets worse and it qualifies, I guess we'll call that an infection. But the next week, maybe they're not in the pro-inflammatory state, but they're still inflamed, they're still subluxated, their vagus nerve is still offline, so they're never actually fully healthy. So if you've been picking up what I've been trying to put down this whole episode is this whole vagus nerve cheat code to supercharging the immune system, it's needed proactively and preventatively, but son of a gun, do we need to tap into the vagus nerve and the nervous system to fully rid the body of illness and infections effectively and completely. What else does the vagus nerve do in terms of immune regulation? It regulates fever. I'm going to do we've been getting a lot of questions because, again, 'tis the season. We've been getting a lot of questions about what to do or not to do about fever. Is fever good? Is fever bad? What level? What number? Should we bring fever down? We've been getting questions that your kids are starting to get adjusted, neurologically focused adjustments, aka their nervous systems are starting to function better, aka their vagus nerve is starting to function better. I'll say it one more time. Sorry to be annoying. I'm annoying myself right now by saying it one more time. AKA that their neuroinflammatory cascade and reflex is working better. So when your kiddos start getting adjusted and you start getting adjusted, everything we just went through step by step gets better, works better. Now, often it hasn't worked very well at all. And there's a lot of congestion and a lot of inflammation and a lot of viruses and bacteria and pathogens and parasites and you name it, and toxins and metals trapped in the body. Guess what the body does when it gets adjusted? Works smarter, works harder, works better. So many of your kids need to experience fever and diarrhea after getting adjusted in order to experience full healing, because that's a sign of your child's body getting better. We've been duped by the medical system to think that fever is bad, but so often, go fever, go. You do you. Get that job done. So the vagus nerve regulates the immune system. If you want to learn more about fever, I think that Ask Dr. Tony show, actually by the time this one came out, we might have already put the fever episode out. So you can tap into that one. And if not, it will be right on the heels of, it'll be next in the podcast reflex cascade. Did I just use a joke? That was bad. That even for me. That's bad. That's bad. Okay. Number 3 thing the vagus nerve does in regulating the immune system. The thing we've been talking about the whole time. It clears the body of infections. I just wanted to say that one more time because that's what you're missing. You got to tap into the nervous system. You got to get your kiddo adjusted. We got to supercharge their vagus nerve via a manual, touch-based physical intervention, because that's how the vagus nerve is most just activated and stimulated, more so than anything else. I'm going to go through a bunch more in addition to that here at the end, but that's how the body clears itself of infections. And this whole time, we've mentioned it without really mentioning it. The other thing the vagus nerve and the immune system does is it actually regulates mucus production. Have you ever felt like, how can so much mucus and so much snot and so much congestion be so not only stuck, but how can so much be produced by my little child? Because when their sympathetic nervous system is too much and their parasympathetic vagus nerve is suppressed, you actually alter and you confuse and you dysregulate mucus production. There is too much of it made, and most importantly, it just can't get out of the body. The child is just stuck in this vicious cycle. Now, mucus production, fever, these things are important. So this whole time, it's kind of like when we talk about stress, we say, you don't want to throw the baby out of the bathwater. It's good to go through challenges. When we talk about fever, we talk about inflammation, we talk about mucus, we talk about congestion, we talk about cough, we talk about sneezing, and we talk about sometimes even diarrhea and vomiting. Why do we have them? Because the body knows when to use them for good to get through bad, to get all the way back to being healthy. What has medicine done to sell us more medications? Whether over the counter, which a ton of these are, fever suppression, cough suppression, nasal decongestion, which is literally about to get banned by the FDA because finally new people are about to be in charge of the FDA that care about health naturally. So it's about to be game on against all these medications over the counter and prescription, prescribed and recommended by pediatricians for generations that not only do not help the body actually get through an illness, and they've been proven to be ineffective. It'd be nice if they were just ineffective, if it was just net neutral. They actually weaken the body further. Okay, so getting a child adjusted, tapping into the vagus nerve, and supercharging that son of a gun is how you make all of these things naturally designed to do the job from the body on its own work better. That is the whole philosophy, neuroscience, and research behind chiropractic. These adjustments that stimulate, activate, and tap into and supercharge the immune system do so via the vagus nerve. They do so via access to the nervous system, and they are not designed to do the job for the body. The adjustment does not clear the sinuses. The adjustment does not clear the airway. The adjustment does not clear the lungs. The adjustment supercharges the vagus nerve, gets this whole inflammatory cascade and neuroimmune system sequence and modulation we just taught you working better than ever before. That boosts and builds back up the body's own natural defense mechanisms, and the body gets rid of the infection. The body takes care of the inflammation. The body gets healthy on its own. Chiropractic is different. If we were to say, we'll come in and do it for you, that leaves the body weakened and suppressed. That's why we have such chronic illness in this entire world. It's not just lifestyle and stressors. When we use medications, we actually weaken the body. Now, is there a time and a place where, thank goodness, we got to bring down fever? Of course. Thank goodness we need an antibiotic or an antiviral. Of course. Sometimes the fire is burning and the building will go down if we don't shut it out medically. But that's a rare circumstance instead of the norm. And what the medical system and pharmaceutical world wants us to do is take these always. The more often you take them, the more suppressed your child's immune system, the more dysregulated their vagus nerve becomes, and the further that illness gets trapped into the body. There's more. One last section, one last nerd term to bring to the table. A term called cytokines. I told you I was going to go super granular and super nerdy, and I just want to finish with this last chapter about cytokines. When the nervous system is dysregulated, then the vagus nerve, then the immune system are dysregulated, and now we know, because we throw off the inflammatory cascade, the body becomes stuck in a perpetual cycle of chronic inflammation. Even when your diet, your lifestyle, your environment is everything clean and awesome and wonderful, that can still be where your child is chronically congested and chronically constipated with illness and inflammation. And there's a conversation about something called cytokines. When the vagus nerve and the nervous system are dysfunctional and dysregulated, that inflammatory reflex gets broken down, and it leads to chronic inflammation due to excessive cytokine release. It's called a cytokine storm. So it's actually pretty conversational, as it should have been, around the time of COVID, because we were already living with millions of people with completely dysregulated, dysfunctional immune systems, nervous systems, microbiomes, metabolic systems, and compromised health function. And then there was a virus made in a flippin' lab that was manipulated to be something our bodies had never seen before. So any natural defense that chronically sick people might have had left over was not very helpful to get them through this. And so they were stuck in these cytokine storms already, and then triggered an even bigger one. And that's not a good thing, because if there's already chronic illness, already autoimmune, we know that this immune system, nervous system, inflammatory cascade, cytokine world is already a mess, okay? And so what happens is we're more susceptible to infections, and it's more difficult to rid the body of infections when the vagus nerve is not doing its job. And you can look at things like cytokines, TNF, and interleukin. You can do all sorts of studies, lab work in the functional med world. So here's actually, I want to put a bow on it with this, okay? And then we're going to talk about what to do. I have seen in the last couple of years, because awesomely, wonderfully, there's been an explosion of biomedical, natural medicine, functional medicine, integrated medicine. I talk about this a lot on our podcast and in our content, and I need to talk about it a lot more, because there is a plus more than one, wildly awesome effect as people move from conventional pharmaceutical-based medicine to natural, functional, integrated medicine. But there's still something missing, because what I find all the time now, all the stinking time, is that families have had these wildly awesome, wildly deep dive lab assessments done. They've done 47 vials of blood work on their child. They've done hair analysis. They've done stool analysis. And they're looking for the things we're talking about in this episode. They are looking for heavy metal toxicity. They are looking for inflammatory markers, chronic, deeper, more just kind of stuff that evades traditional medical testing. So functional med, integrated medicine always looks deeper, and it's awesome. And they will find all of these factors to do with the immune system, very, very, very pro-inflamed. And a lot of these inflammatory markers way through the roof, along with heavy metals. Now, if you pause right there, it seems pretty cut and dry, right? Well, if we have all of this pro-inflammatory stuff happening within the physiological system, so blood work, stool, those are not neurological tests. Those are chemistry tests. Those are physiological tests, okay? Many of these chemical molecules, many of these things like cytokines, like neurotransmitters, especially would fit this mold, aka the term, they are markers and communication signals that work for the nervous system. But do not be fooled. Lab work, no matter how deep, how awesome, and how incredible, is not a neurological exam. Neurological function and vagus nerve function cannot be directly, completely detected with lab work. You actually have to use what are called the insight scans and neurological functionality technology like we use in our offices to directly, completely, fully measure nervous system and vagus nerve dysfunction. And so if your child, this last story of this many chapter conversation here, what we have seen is hundreds, actually probably by now thousands of families who have gone deep down this biomedical road. They have had the lab analysis that says my child has way too much of these inflammatory markers and way too little good things. Zinc's low, serotonin's low, magnesium's low, omegas are low, vitamin D is low, vitamins. The good stuff is low and the bad stuff is high. I'll run it through my Iowa farmer filter of communication. So what is this family told to do? Awesomely clean up the diet, change the lifestyle, take a ton of supplements, maybe even do some binders and detoxifiers and everything else. And then 6 months, 12 months later, rerun this blood work again and again and again. And if this is your family, when we get to the action step, which you probably already know where I'm going with that, they run the blood work again after doing tons of lifestyle modification, tons of supplementation, tons of even detoxification. And those numbers barely budge. They can't get the labs to change. They can't get their child to poop. They can't get the body rid of inflammation. What we just taught for this hour is the answer to that frustrating equation where you've invested so much into biomedical intervention and you've probably seen some incredible changes. Just the other day, I talked to a mom whose child was level 2 autism, had a lot of stimming, had a lot of social emotional challenges, a lot of speech challenges, a lot of sensory and motor tone and coordination challenges, a lot of sleep issues, a lot of gut issues, and a lot of chronic illness, chronic ear infections, ear tubes, tonsils, and adenoids out. Everything I taught you here, this child had it all. They went the full biomedical integrated functional route. They completely changed his diet. They added, I think it was like $1,200 or $1,500 a month worth of supplements and detox and everything else. And some of his sleeping challenges, some of his gut challenges, and some of his stimming have come down in a really nice way, in a really good way. They're not gone. He still has gut issues. He still gets sick often. He still has sensory social challenges. His speech issues haven't changed at all. He still stems some. So I hope that this one case, which I put in here to make sure to remind to bring it to life for you, because I always want to take the science and make it relatable. What an incredible mom. What awesome doctors and practitioners that are working with this family. They're making progress. They are definitely seeing some of the numbers budge and change a little bit on the labs run 6 months later. And mom is definitely seeing some improvements in quality of life. And if you just want to split the hairs, technically he now fits a level 1 autism diagnosis instead of level 2. Holy heck, is that to be celebrated. But holy heck, is that a story of a child whose nervous system, immune system, and vagus nerve are still dysregulated and subluxated. And it fits his case. Emergency C-section. There's all these signs of his vagus nerve being thrown off neurobiomechanically first. And that's why his cytokines, his TNF, his interleukins, his CRP, and all of these inflammatory factors were through the roof first. And he was so susceptible to illness, which got him into the perfect storm and went through it. So what the heck do we do to tap into the vagus nerve and supercharge your child's immune system so they can not only hopefully avoid these infections and illnesses, but also fully, completely get rid of them once in there? The very first place you probably already know I'm going to start is a high dosage of neurologically focused chiropractic care. Now, I need you to hear what I said. For the benefit of your beautiful rock star, let's get them all the way healthy kiddos and family. Full dosage. Now, I don't love the word dosage because I don't deal in medications or even supplementation, but it fits the conversation to say most pediatric and family chiropractors, if they are not a trained PX doctor, they may under-recommend the amount of care your child needs to get their immune system all the way better, to get their vagus nerve supercharged, and they may under-adjust as well. A lot of pediatric techniques for this specific population, kiddos who are chronically congested and chronically sick, we need to use the right technique, which has enough of a stimulation and activation, so what are called neurotonal HVLA manual adjustments. Now, they are still as safe and gentle and so wildly effective for chronically sick kids. So if you're going to a chiropractor, the two variables, and I've done episodes about this, if you need more, you just send us a DM and I'll send you the whole episode that goes into vivid detail, what I'm about to overview. The levels, the levers that you can really tell that a chiropractor is going to be the full dose place that gets your child all the way healthy is they have to get the care plan right. So there is likely to be a high initial frequency for many weeks. Most times, if kids are chronically sick and their vagus nerve is dysregulated, actually for many months. So we need to stay at this higher dosage via frequency. And then they need to have the right technique. They need to get adjusted in the right manner that is most effective to rid the body of this chronic vagus nerve dysfunction and inflammation. And there's a specific set of techniques that do a really, really good job for that. And then there's some that are too light and don't do a good job for that. So those are the two levers. And if what I just said resonates and you're like, dang it, I need to learn more about exactly what he's talking about, you send us a DM. We have a whole episode about that. And it goes through the different types of chiropractic and the levers that are really there. Or you can probably find it on your own, wherever you're listening to this. Just scroll up. I do not remember what episode, but I definitely break that down. But again, send us a DM and we can make it easy for you by sending that link. So these adjustments done at the right frequency and the right technique for the right duration, and all of that is dependent upon the level and the depth of your child's neuroimmune vagus nerve dysfunction. And so we run our insight scans. That's how you really know you're seeing a nervous system focused pediatric and family expert, is they're not guessing. They're not just going on symptoms. They're not just going on old school postural palpation exams. They're actually using technology to assess vagus nerve dysfunction, because you got to find how busted up and broken it is before you can determine how much it needs to be supercharged to get your child's immune system rocking again. And our technology, especially our thermal scans and our HRV scans, really do that job. What else, though? In closing, goodness gracious, chiropractic is the catalyst to change so many families' lives, kids' lives who are chronically sick and chronically inflamed. But there's so much you can do with lifestyle strategies. When you want to tap into the vagus nerve and use it to supercharge your child's immune system, the first place to start after chiropractic adjustments is really in your lifestyle. Slow down. Do everything you can to create calm in your family's life, to create calm in the daily and weekly schedule, to have a place where it's very quiet, no TVs, the whole family is sitting, relaxing, maybe even tap into some deep breathing. Definitely do everything you can to get outside in nature and go for a walk and play in the woods and go to the park. I'm telling you, the stuff that you hear all the time, the very basics, the very nuts and bolts, the very one-on-one stuff, that's what the vagus nerve needs. That's how God designed us to be healthy. And then you may say, but Dr. Tony, are you not putting this podcast episode out in the winter? You are some hardy people, my friends. If you live where it gets cold, y'all chose to, all right? There's things called hats, gloves, winter coats, thermal underwear. You bet. I said underwear on the podcast. It's by far not I've said other things more funky than underwear. And so my kids love winter. For all of their years, we have a harder time getting them to come inside from the cold than from the heat. Cold is actually really good for the vagus nerve. Anybody notice a wee bit of a trend with cold plunges, cold showers, nervous system regulation and resets via saunas and then cold plunges in contrast? Yeah, it's actually pretty cool how God designed us. You know what an adjustment does? It hits reset to the nervous system and to the vagus nerve. You know what? Going outside, being active, and even actually, to be particular, getting into the cold does? It actually resets and builds the immune system. So why do we get sicker when we stay inside in the artificial air and heat of our HVAC systems? Because we're not exposing our body to the things that would supercharge the vagus nerve. Get outside, build a snowman, let's go. Take your kids on a snowman battle and smoke those kids. Show them what's up, show them who's boss. It'll build them resilience, both in their defense of snowballs and building snow forts, and it will build resilience into their vagus nerve and their immune systems, and then targeted nutrition. Absolutely, positively get macronutrients, clean proteins, tons of hydration, electrolytes, and absolutely go to an anti-inflammatory diet. If your kid is chronically sick, anti-inflammatory diets and lifestyle changes and supplementation are essential. You'll notice I put them third because so many families have already done all that, but they haven't done the chiropractic. They haven't done the get outside, be active, cold exposure sort of things to really supercharge the vagus nerve. So I put these things in order of which is more potent to get the vagus nerve online. They're all important, everything on the list, and there's a little more. We have tons of articles on the website about vagus nerve stimulation tips and strategies. I'm going to have the team link those in the show notes. And if you need help with anti-inflammatory diets and lifestyle changes, we will also link you over to the Documenting Hope website. Through that incredible organization, which we work with all the time, they have tons of nutritionists and coaches that will help you make these transitions to an anti-inflammatory diet and a really, really healthy natural lifestyle. We here at PX Docs focus entirely on the nervous system and nervous system regulation and boosting the vagus nerve through chiropractic adjustments. And then we partner up with those. If you feel like you need extra support and help in your family, you know your crew best, reach out to us and we will always connect you. If there's something we are not best in the world at, we will connect you to the people who absolutely positively are. All right. Per usual, I was thinking, even talking cytokines and TNF and interleukin 1 and 6 and C-reactive protein and nucleus tractus solitarius and disafferentation and efferentation. I'll stop now. I thought for sure I could get this done in 30 to 40 minutes. I never get deep dive episodes. I shouldn't say never. I think I've been a few unicorns in this first year of podcasting where I got a solo episode done in 30 or 40 minutes or less. But this one, I'm not looking at the clock, but it seems like it's gone a wee bit longer than that. So to recap, we just did that. This is the most important thing you can tap into if your kids are chronically sick and you feel like you've exhausted everything else medical and everything else natural. The vagus nerve is your cheat code. Neurologically focused chiropractic is that solution. And even if you're already in the midst of it and you haven't turned the corner, stick with it. When our kiddos today have such shut down, suppressed, and dysregulated vagus nerves and immune systems, it takes a long time, sometimes even years, to fully repair and rebuild this system when it's that dysregulated. So stay the course, stay the course, stay the course. I love it. I get it. Stay with it. It's not easy. Always worth it. And the last request always from the podcast is if you find this wildly helpful, you guys send in so many great testimonials and give so many incredible reviews. I mean it here, just human to human. Goodness gracious, do they touch my heart. The team is always great about finding them and sending them to me and sharing them with me so that it just perfectly, incredibly refuels me to keep doing this and bring other rock stars on with us. But we'd love to reach more rock star families with your rock star help. So please continue to share this. Please continue to review this. Please continue. If you follow it on Apple or Spotify, so helpful, so incredible, please make sure to download it. That's one little thing my team tells me all the time to put in here because it really helps show those platforms, hey, this is the one podcast. There isn't anything else out there that talks about nervous system health for our kids and our families. There's literally no other podcast. There's a zillion about natural health and integrated and functional and wellness and everything else. And I'm the biggest fan. I listen to them too, just like you do. This is the only one in this space. And those of you who have experienced the miracles from your kiddos going through what we talk about episode after episode on this, please share it. I know you already are, so thank you to those that do, and please continue to do exactly that, because every kid counts, and we are here to bring you and your family and future generations endless, obsessive, relentless, or going nowhere hope, answers, and drug-free help. God bless you. If you catch this around Christmas, what a wonderful season to celebrate our Savior. That's the life He sent Him here for us to live. Full of health, full of incredible miracles, and we need a fully functioning, rockin' vagus nerve to do exactly that and supercharge our healing and supercharge our family's life. God bless you. Love you. See you on the next one.